Although Bennington is in Vermont, the Battle of Bennington actually took place a few miles west in New York State. So they call this here the Gathering Storm. At the end of July 1777, the British invasion from Canada under the General John Burgoyne had progressed to Fort Edward on the Hudson River. Desperately in need of supplies, Burgoyne dispatched an expedition on August 11th under Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Baum to capture the American storehouses at Bennington, Vermont, which were thought to be guarded by only a handful of rebel militia. About half of Baum's troops were mercenaries who spoke only German. Although from Brunswick, these men, like all German troops, were commonly called Hessians by the Americans. The rest of Baum's force consisted of a small detachment of British sharpshooters, Indians, Canadians, and American loyalists. So Lieutenant Baum had came to this area on a way into Bennington, Vermont in search of supplies because they thought that was not very heavily guarded. He was wrong. Now, Baum, what he had with him was some group of British sharpshooters, some Indians, some Canadians, some American loyalists, but most of his troops were German mercenaries. And they thought there were only a couple dozen American guardsmen, but there was 1,500 men under General John Stark who met his threat. You kind of see from this map they have here, this is where Baum's troops were on top of the hill we're at right now, which is good high ground, I guess. So Colonel Baum was here, and his plan was move across the now state line of New York and Vermont and get into Bennington, Vermont, which had some supplies. But he didn't realize General Stark had a camp here with 1,500 men. He only thought it was maybe a couple dozen. General Stark and his allies used some flanking maneuvers and were able to find an open field to lead their advance on the hill. Frederick Baum and the British's defense against this were two cannons set on top of the hill overlooking the field. So up there is where the cannon was, where they were firing down on the American troops, hoping they come to this open field. Open field looks pretty big, doesn't it? Yeah, it wasn't so big back then. In 1777, this was a tree line. So when they were trying to fire down on them, the militia just fell back into the woods here and they couldn't get shots on the Americans, and they slowly picked off the British and the Germans and leveled them. This battle would have been one of the most underrated and significant victories of the American Revolution for the colonists. The victory here set the stage for the future victory at Saratoga, which would eventually draw the French into the war and help the colonists win the American Revolution. Located just a few miles away and across the border into Vermont is the monument celebrating this victory, the Bennington Memorial. There they are, boys. We beat them today, or Molly Stark sleeps a widow tonight. There you have victorious John Stark and the tallest thing in the state of Vermont. It's about 300 foot tall, and there is an observation level of about 212 feet up there, but unfortunately, due to the current conditions, it is closed. That's going to do it from Bennington, Vermont, and who knows where the toll road will lead to next.